Jack down there?
He's just a hack. He's just an absolute hack. He gets his ass kicked by his teammates every week. It's just, it's fucking terrible.
Hello, race fans, and welcome to the Intentional Wreck Podcast, the NASCAR podcast made for fans by fans, from the casuals to the lifelong gearheads. My name is Jeff Page. These are my fellow hosts, Finn and Corey, and you can currently find us on YouTube, Spotify, and iHeartRadio under Intentional Wreck, coming soon to other platforms near you. Before we really kick things off, I just want to take a moment and say thanks to all of you who have already listened, liked, and subscribed. The reception we've received thus far has been beyond warm and welcoming, and we can't thank you enough. Very uncharacteristic of the internet, but I'll take it. My dudes, it's finally here. Today, after what feels like an eternity since last fall, we're finally here to talk about the great American race. We made it, boys. It's officially Daytona week. How are we feeling?
Oh, let's go. Cannot wait.
So excited. So excited.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's going to be a good time. I'm super excited. At this point, we're actually going to get together and watch the race. So we'll get real live reactions for ourselves. You guys don't get to see that because...
No, those will not be
recorded. I tell you what, if Denny Hamlin is anywhere near the lead, I will have a camera out on you. You are, without a doubt, the most rowdy fan in the last lap of a NASCAR race I've ever seen. I mean,
Get your earplugs ready, bro.
Quick story last year to Richmond where we took Corey to his first race, and Denny's chasing down Truex. And if you guys have never been to Richmond, they've got bleacher seats. And Jeff is, first of all, completely obliterated. And he is slapping the back of the chair, this bleachers in front of him so much, everybody down the thing, it's probably all the way into turn 2, can feel it, and you're just screaming, let's go! Let's go! You know what? Send me the photo of you. He was so loud. Somebody from NASCAR saw him and took him and Corey down the victory lane where I'm going to put it right in here with the pod, where you got pictures with Denny Hamlin. And my favorite part, as a lifelong Commanders fan, you walk right by Coach Gibbs, like...
I mean, that was the thing that got me, was standing there in victory lane, right? And Denny's up here on stage, like going hat photo, which was its own like thing, because I hadn't seen that part live before. It's one of those moments you don't really catch. And then on top of that, like, I am 5 feet away from Coach. All right, like, here's the thing. I have been rooting for the Commanders and, under their former name for my entire life. And it's not just me. It's my parents, my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents. Someone from my family has been a fan of this team since they came to DC in the 30s. And on top of that, I believe I have at least one like great uncle who used to fly with the team back at those times. I mean, the only way it could have gone any further is if I had somebody back in Boston, and we're all DC, Virginia, North Carolina within my family. So that's just not, that's not there for me, but
Coach
being
Gibbs
there in victory
legend.
lane,
I mean, that's
just
just
great.
what it is.
Yeah.
Legend. But that, I mean, great moment. But yeah, huge shout out to everybody. I believe, Corey, you got to walk somebody through some new fanship through the comments section.
I did. What's up again, everybody? Corey, I'm your resident new guy, learning right along with you. Shout out Jay DeFreitas, old friend of mine, got away from the sport for a long time, watched the pod last week, first episode, and goes, you know what, man? I'm kind of in. I'm kind of back in. Chatted with him. He got Christopher Bell. Kind of went through his driver. So, Jay, congratulations, buddy. Welcome back. Love having you watching the pod. Follow Cindric's Lair. Jay, comment. Drop your link for all your fitness needs. He's your guy.
Yep.
But yeah, super pumped to be back, man. It's just it's cool having done now my first podcast to see the response and to get to share that with people, and to see someone like my guy Jay, who I've known forever, who used to be a fan, came back to the sport because I've gotten into it. So I get to have that in common with him now. Very, very cool.
So I think with the next part, let's go over the Speed Week schedule and what we're going to be looking at on Sunday. So at this point, we've got Wednesday, February 15th. The Cup qualifier is going to be at 8:15 p.m. Thursday will be the duels at 7 p.m. through 8:45, I believe was what we had listed. Then Friday will be the Next Era Energy 250 truck race. Saturday is going to be the Beef It's What's for Dinner 300 Xfinity race at 5 p.m. Then Sunday is the moment we've all been waiting for, with the Cup cars getting back out on the track for the Daytona 500 at 2:30, and I can't wait.
I can't wait for
It's What's for Dinner 300.
Yeah.
That's really the name of the race.
Yeah, that's
Welcome
the
to
sponsor.
NASCAR, Corey.
Welcome to NASCAR, Corey.
The sponsorships, it just gets that much more fun.
I don't have it
every
prepped,
year.
but I'm going to have to tell you about the funniest names. That's what we'll do. We did paint schemes last week. Sometime in the future, I'm going to find the top 5 funniest names of a race of all time, and we can
I'm
go
here for
there.
it.
But Truck Race 730, this is a pro Haley Deegan podcast. We're all going to be
That's
Haley
right.
Deegan fans, so we're
Let's go,
super
Haley.
excited for that.
So as everybody kind of knows, coming into the very beginning of the season and coming into Daytona, not only does that mean we have our biggest race of the year, aside from anything with the playoff and the championship, it is also our first plate race. So with that being the case, I think it would be a really good idea to maybe kick this over to Finn to give us some more ideas about what makes plate racing unique. If you're listening here and you're not necessarily a long time, or you've been in after the plates have really become their own source of controversy or been something to really discuss and they're just kind of commonplace for you, I think it's important to expel a little bit of background on that and why it's necessarily important, especially when we get to the super speedways and we get to the longer tracks where the restrictor plates start coming into play. So Finn, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the restrictor plate? Like, where did it come from? What are we looking at? What does it mean? And why is it really important, and what makes it unique?
For sure. Well, again, if you're a new NASCAR fan or you're a veteran, hopefully there's something to learn here. Welcome to Daytona down in Florida, kind of the heart and start of NASCAR, if you will, racing on Daytona Beach. We have a 2-mile super speedway racetrack here, and you're going to hear this term that keeps popping up: plate racing, restrictor plate. What does that mean? What does that look like? And we went ahead and put together something just to kind of show you guys a little bit what a restrictor plate is. So there in the very top left, there is the actual plate. It's like a square thing with 4 circles, and that device, that plate, is going to sit between the carburetor and the intake manifold. Now, I'm no big car guy, so you big car guys, drop your comments and tell me how wrong I am. But the whole point is that's going to limit air to the engine, which then is going to restrict the horsepower, among another thing. But the real thing is why. Well, back in, I want to say 86 was the last time that we saw a race at Daytona or Talladega, and now Atlanta Superspeedway, that we did not use these restrictor plates on these races, and that let these cars go like 215 miles an hour. Simply way too dangerous. The cars just get way too fast, and it's just extremely dangerous situation. What this does, though, is that limits the horsepower, and now instead of a single car being able to be faster, we have a situation where drafting is king, finding draft partners or multiple draft partners. And what that does is that shrinks the field. So at any other racetrack, be it a 1.5 mile racetrack or a short track or a road course, you're going to see cars expanding, and there's going to be a lot of distance between the leaders and 10th place and this out of the third throughout the racetrack, people getting lapped. But at super speedways, it's different because these restrictor places, everybody's faster together. So what you're going to see Daytona is from start to finish, you're going to see multiple lines of cars, in the Navy term, nut to butt, or right, stacked up against each other, all right? And it's all going to be about survival. That's the word that you're going to put at a super speedway race. It's survival. Can I get to the end of this race scar-free? And if I'm there at that point, if I'm in the top 15, you have a chance to win this race. You get the right drafting partner, the right push at the right time, the right opening, and the willingness to put that car in there and make it happen. You could very much win yourself a plate race as a result. We see a lot of guys that might win their only race in NASCAR at this kind of thing. I wouldn't say it's necessarily easier to win a race here, but a situation like this, smaller teams have a shot. They have more of an option because maybe they don't have an engine package that can handle the 1.5 miles and compete, but at Daytona, they can. And also, everybody puts their money in these races. These are the big ones for sponsorship. And then my last note here is relying on your teammates and your extended teammates, your OEM, or as Corey asked, the original equipment manufacturer, right? Your Ford. Your teammates are no longer just the guy that owns your car. Now your teammates are anybody that's the same type of car you have, be it a Ford, be it a Toyota or a Chevy, you're always going to be looking for friends, and that's kind of like right behind. There's teammates, and then there's fellow manufacturers. You're going to see situations, especially if we're under green flag conditions and people have to come pit for tires and fuel. All of the Fords are going to come together. All of the Chevys are going to come together, because if you pit by yourself, you're coming out by yourself, and you're not going to have anybody to help draft, and you're not going to have any speed. So that's the quick rundown on what makes this super speedways great. Before I move on to what makes Daytona in this race specifically, I was figuring, Corey, you got to see the last Daytona race, which was for the playoffs. That's the Austin Dillon one. I think you got to see Talladega in the playoffs.
I did.
And you may have caught an Atlanta race, which has recently been remodeled from a 1.5 mile track to a kind of a mini super speedway, but it is a plate race.
Sure.
I'm curious on, as a new fan, what are your thoughts and what are your reactions to this kind of racing?
So this is my absolute favorite kind of race, right? Like as a new fan, I kind of come in and I'm feeling out kind of what I like and what I enjoy. Super speedways are my absolute favorite. I love when these guys are at absolute pedal to the metal, but they're right on top of each other, right? Like everybody's super tight together. There's bumping and like bump drafting on every single turn, every single straightaway. These guys are constantly making contact. It's super, super exciting. I did catch Talladega last year. I did in 2022, and I did catch the Daytona right before the playoff race at Daytona, not the 500. I forget what it was called, but this will be my first Daytona 500. I couldn't be more excited. It brings out the best in these guys. And last year you had Austin Cindric win it in his very, very first race as a professional. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how these cars perform. And I think what you're going to see really, if you want to keep your eye on something, is you'll see manufacturer dominance. Is kind of my suspicion of what we'll see, where one of these brands, I will call them brands of cars. Finn loves calling them OEM, but your Ford, your Toyota, your Chevy, one of them will just find it. And then you'll see that those cars, you see 7 or 8 of the top 10 of all the same make and model. So very, very cool race. And it's what NASCAR is all about. I mean, it's Daytona. What more needs to be said?
It's what's for dinner.
That's true.
The plate racing is what's for dinner.
Right. Well, something
so the
that
plate
I wanted
racing,
to do,
if I could add one more thing, the plate
Sure.
racing is super interesting because I think an important takeaway from what Finn was saying was that what it does is it levels the playing field. That's my understanding, right? Completely levels the playing field. And it really will come down to how these drivers and how these teams are like manipulating their situation to their benefit, because while their car may be a little faster here or there, they'll find little ways to, putting tape on this part and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think what you'll see is that anybody can win this thing. Right. I mean, they proved it last year. So
I'd also add that on top of that, you'll also see some interesting strategy from a stage perspective. You'll see a lot of guys that you may see that would normally be favorites or would be, typically out towards the front, not always run up to the front, and they'll do it on purpose. You'll see guys kind of drop back a few spots and try and get more into the packs, and then that way they can kind of keep themselves out of the chaos for a little while, so that way they can extend. If they know they got the car, they know they've got the parts, they know that they'll be able to stay in this thing so long as they don't get spun, so long as they don't end up in the infield or get anything particularly damaged, they'll forego taking stage points if it means that they can be there in the third stage or be there down towards the end when it's really going to count. You'll see guys that would typically be up front, like they'll drop back out into that 8 to 12 range or something like that, and usually find a buddy or two and kind of sit back in the pack and watch the draft and wait to make their move. So what you see it's happening in the very beginning of the race, it may not look anything like the end of the race when it finally comes down. That entire positioning grid is going to look almost completely different than when it started in most cases, because you got folks that are strategically trying to do that. And then also to the fair play aspect of it, you'll see other folks that will embrace the chaos and try and get those stage points right away because they may not have the car to get themselves down to the finish line at the very end. so they will try and go for broke to get that first or second stage. So then that way they can take their points just in case they end up spun out, or don't end up finishing or don't, get out there towards the end or end up way towards the back of the pack too far. So it's interesting from a strategic standpoint. So if you're watching either your first Daytona or you're watching your first super speedway, or if you're early in your, if you're early in your fandom kind of watching this, check that out. Like, you'll see names you've heard of a lot, seeming like they're not necessarily making a move right away. And then, an hour later, there they are right in the thick of it. Like, so in a lot of cases, that's usually according to plan.
Right. Some guys, I mean, the safest place to be at a super speedway race is like the front and then the rear. You know what I'm saying? Throughout the race. And I think stage racing changed a lot. I know a lot of NASCAR fans are split on stages and racing and stuff like that because of the caution and how it breaks everything up. And we talked about that last time with the road courses. But I think where stage racing makes its best appearance, the best of it, is at these kinds of tracks, because those guys now that are in the back, they're like, maybe I should go get some playoff points. Maybe I should go get some stage points and drive through the field and try to get it. And that it creates that racing, because in the past, and we're going to go over some of the past racing at super speedways, but normally they fan out in single file line, and then we're like, okay, we're going to drive around for 400 miles, and then this last 100 miles is when we'll fight for position. And that didn't really lead to the most interesting, because I mean, seriously, it'd be watching a race and they're just single file all racing around the high line against the wall for forever long. But now it looks like, because of stages, at least multiple times throughout the race, they're going to pull out and they're going to try to find ways to get some points. One of the things that I wanted to mention too is kind of what makes Daytona great. And the Daytona 500. So as you saw when Jeff was talking about Speed Weeks, the schedule, we got qualifying. Now, for every NASCAR race, the drivers go out, they run a couple laps, and then they line up for the race based on who had the fastest lap. Daytona 500 is different for a couple reasons. One, because why not? We're NASCAR, but we do what we want. And two, because there's a lot of entries that are sponsors are spending a lot of money to try and get into the Daytona 500. There's going to be a ton of new entries. Guys like, again, Jimmy Johnson, Travis Pastrana, Zane Smith, and some other names are going to be, fielding cars to try to get in, because this is the biggest purse in NASCAR, I believe. So what's going to happen is when they qualify on Wednesday night, that is only for first and second. So as long as, whoever ends up first and second, they're locked in. Then on Thursday, we're going to have what's called the duels. And that means everybody that, think about, the odd and even. If you qualified first, third, fifth, any odd number, you're going to be in one duel. And then all the even numbers of the outside lane guys are in another duel race. And again, as long as they don't wreck out, the guys that qualified first and second will maintain their spot. The rest of it, the finishing order for these duels, these quick races, is going to determine the starting order for that inside line. Does that make sense? So the winner of that race will start third, second place of that race will start fifth, and then same for the outside line on the second one. The winner of the race will start fourth. The winner of that race will start sixth, I think it is, on the outside lane. Don't know how my explanation went, but that's the general idea. And that allows those cars that don't have what we call charters in NASCAR, which basically a charter is, they bought a charter, which means they get a guaranteed entry to every race. So all these guys that are coming up, showing Jimmy Johnson, that's not a chartered car. Zane Smith, Travis Pastrana for 23XI, those aren't chartered cars. They've got to go in and race their way into this competition to see what they're going to get. So that's really important. And I would expect first and second place to slide, the guys that got the pole, the front row, they're going to slide right to the back, and they're just keeping their car alive, because there's no incentive for them to race that race.
Well, especially with it being the first race of the season, there's plenty of time to make up those stage points, right? Like,
yes,
you don't need stage points in the first stage of the season in order to really set yourself up for the playoffs. And one more thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, to Finn's point about the qualifying and how it's a little bit different. Last year's race, all the Hendrick Chevys, Larson, Bowman, Byron, and Elliott, all qualified in the top 5 fastest lap times.
Right.
Only, I believe, one of them actually started in the top 5 when the race started, so it got all shuffled up by the
duels,
the duels, and
I think
the duels and all that stuff.
I feel like Bowman and Byron, if I recall, I think Bowman and Byron were front row guys and got
Yeah,
locked
I
in
think
on
so.
that. And I feel like
Yeah.
one of them may have got sent to the back, be a backup car changing a part. But the whole point is,
Yeah.
I believe Byron was on the pole. And actually, Bowman has the nickname Front Roman Bowman because he is qualified first at the Daytona 500 like multiple times.
Yeah.
But really, that's not a Bowman thing. Hendrick, it's a chance for them to show off. This is probably the most prepped for a race across the board, Corey. All of November, January, they are focused on these cars because, again, winning the Daytona 500, extremely
everything.
prestigious award. And then the next thing that we had on here is why do we have our Super Bowl as the first race? And in fact, I would say a lot of people are more excited for the Daytona 500 than they are the true championship race at Phoenix. Now, Jeff, I'm curious on your thoughts, but my thought has always been the reason why it's so big is because not only have it's so hype, it's the first race of the year, and it's like the first, it's like opening day of baseball, but imagine every team is playing together on the same field. That's what's special about NASCAR, is that every team is playing at the same time. There's not 15 football games going on. There's one race. So everybody's fanship is there. All the hype is there. All the sponsors are there in Florida, ready to go. And the winner is guaranteed a playoff spot. So
yeah, and that's huge. And one of the things I think I'll also mention is that I honestly, if you were to ask, plenty of casuals out there, I'm sure they would almost be surprised to know Daytona doesn't count for much more than your standard possible playoff spot or extra points or anything along those lines, just because it is such a well-revered race. I mean, there's plenty of people that don't know a damn thing about NASCAR, but they know the name, the Daytona 500. They know that it's a big deal. They know that it's a spectacle, just like they would say they know the Indianapolis 500, which, by the way, I also wanted to make sure that I gave a shout out to Connor Daly, who's going to be entering the race this year and taking a crack at trying to win Daytona and the Indy 500. I want to make sure IndyCar Twitter doesn't come after me on this one because, it's really good to see one of these folks get in there and really take a shot at it. I'm excited to see him get behind the wheel of a cup car.
There's another IndyCar driver taking a shot at the Daytona 500.
Is there?
Yeah, his name is Jimmy
Is he
Johnson.
an IndyCar driver now? Like, is that like
He's
his
a NASCAR
whole thing,
driver.
or is that his claim to fame, Finn?
He finished like top 10 at Texas once in an IndyCar. I think it counts. Mm-hmm. So, I totally forgot. Shout out to Connor Daly. And I mentioned Travis Pastrana, and I found this, I recalled this little clip, and I wanted to share it with you guys. It was Travis Pastrana, and he's talking about super speedway racing. He calls NASCAR the smartest drivers. But he talks a lot. He gives a lot of insight of his experience going in. So go ahead and let's listen to this. This is Travis Pastrana.
He obviously doesn't do it justice, which is so many sports.
You got to go around right to the front, 200 miles an hour. You're like, whoa.
And sitting down in like at the bottom of that circuit and looking up, like you said, 4 stories. I'm like, how do they even make that? Let alone drive around it that fast.
So Daytona is 3 lanes wide. Like if you're taking car lanes like down the street.
Yeah.
And multiple times the cars go 4 wide. So just take your average 3-lane road and then put 4 cars in it. Now here's the kicker. And you can't see us from TV because they put the stupid cameras on top of the car. But you can't see over top of the car in front of you.
Yeah.
So you're going down and all you can see, you're pushing the car in front of you. And you can't see the cars beside you because you got these like Hans and harnesses. So you can see only what's out here. So you can't see, if a car's right beside you, you can't tell. And that, if a car's passing you on the right, like their lane's going a little faster, it sucks the whole car around.
Oh.
So you're relying on your spotter. If he says, door basically means that someone's on your door. So at 3 degrees of yaw, which means the car's just stepped out barely at all.
Yeah.
You have 800 pounds of side force at 190 miles an hour. So picture you're doing a bench press and someone puts their pinky on when you can't quite. So you're drifting the car around the corner and then someone takes a little bit of that side force out. Or if they're all the way on your door, you still can't see them. It's all gone. So I crashed so many people the first time and everyone's giving me the finger and flipping me off and throwing their helmets at me. I'm like, I didn't even touch you. They're like, dude, you took the wind off my outside corner.
No shit.
Anyway, all new to me, so it was really cool. But Daytona, so you're going down 200 miles an hour, and there's a little thing that says Sunoco.
That says what?
Sunoco. It's a gas company.
Yeah.
And it's right where the track starts to turn. So you're 200 miles an hour, you're 4 wide, and the guy tells you you're 4 wide, and you're trying to think, all right, 4 wide, second from the top. So you're like, I have to leave exactly one car length here, and I probably have a couple inches on my right and a couple inches on my left. I can't see any other cars, and I can't see in front of my hood. And you're trying to drive perfectly in this area, and you look up, and the second you see the Sunoco sign, you start turning the wheel in, and you drop. And if you're on the top, you're actually dropping and sliding, and like the whole car is sliding, and everyone does it in unison. And if one jackass doesn't see the Sunoco sign or turns or his car pushes or slides more than anyone else's, it's a pileup.
Game over.
It's so much fun.
Dude, yeah, like...
So that's Travis.
I'd like
Armstrong.
I want to make sure that I point out here that when he was talking about the banking and he's talking about there, he said 3 degrees of yaw. He did not say 3 degrees of y'all. And when I first heard that, I was like, did Travis Pastrana just go country on us there for a second? But
Look at you,
he
Dilly.
was specifically talking about and for anybody that didn't see on the video, he made the hand motion to specifically note that he's talking about the twist on the vertical axis there. So he's specifically talking about what it's like to be, kind of tilted up on those bank turns and like where he's at and like what his body is actually doing while he's in that car at the time. 3 degrees of y'all would generally just be a cool phrase that I think should be.
Should be the name of the podcast.
I'm sure it's been said before by
Could have
someone.
been the podcast name.
So Corey, thoughts on that, and then just in general. I mean,
first of all, I'm an avid iRacing guy. For those of you that don't know what iRacing is, it's a racing simulator. You could call it a video game, right? It's kind of not really a video game. It's designed to be as much like actual racing as possible. And having experienced in some small way myself what he's talking about, it is insane because these guys are you can't understand how fast they're going until you see them in person. First of all, TV does not do it justice. It just doesn't do it justice. Is the fastest moving objects most humans have ever seen in their life when they go to see them. And when you start talking about they're 2 inches apart on either side, and then the one guy's up against a concrete wall, and then the inside guy's on literally there's nothing holding him there. It's just a line on the road. And the skill and patience and focus that it takes to do what these guys are doing at these tracks, it can't be understated. It really can't. I mean, someone like Travis Pastrana, who's done every extreme sport known to man, comes in there and is blown away by these guys they just make it look so easy. And it is anything but easy. It is hugely difficult what these guys do week in and week out.
Something to point out with this too is there's a little bit of foreshadowing there in that something we plan to do here for the pod when we actually have the opportunity is Corey's going to be our general iRacing guy. We will start having track previews with Corey giving us some clips and content when he wants to get out and kind of drive the track and do some racing, and we'll make sure to roast him when he ends up in the back of the pack when he gets a chance. But the
I'm not any good.
There when
Let's
you get
just
your top
start
10.
with that. It's all for the lulz. It's all
right.
for the fun.
we'll do every track except Darlington. That's in Rockingham.
Rockingham.
Corey refuses to go to Darlington again because let's just say he's had his fair share of Darlington kisses and it's been enough.
I have plenty.
So something I also wanted to point out here about, again, the drafting and something that was cool and unique as we kind of travel through the years. I want to take everybody back to around the 2005, 2006, all the way up to the early 2010s. There's a lot of factors that led to this, and what this is something called tandem drafting. Kind of started back in fall 2006 at Talladega. It's kind of a response for a couple things. One, there's some new resurfacing going on, as well as NASCAR really limiting the rules regarding bump drafting. But Dale Jr. is kind of accredited to starting this thing in which getting hooked up with one guy somehow made these cars, because of how smooth it was and how everything was going, allowed them to go faster. So while traditionally in restrictor plate races, everybody's stacked up together, in comes this era now where everybody has one partner. They get one drafting partner. It's called tandem drafting, and they're able to go fast. And this did a lot of things for super speedway racing over that time. One, it made it, I would say, wild. People, forget the parity. People could go back to front at will if you got the right partner. The noses were flat and they lined up extremely well with the bumpers. And then what's interesting is actually Dale Jr. was one of the pioneers saying, "Hey, this is kind of killing super speedway racing." Fans didn't like it all that much. So in 2012, the car package changed. The bumpers were no longer flat, and the front bumpers didn't line up with the rear bumper of the cars, and that pretty much dispelled that until a couple years ago when the Fords, the way that their cars and bumper was actually extremely flat. So for a while, the Fords were dominating the super speedway races. But now we have a thing called side drafting, which is where when you pull up next to the car next to you, to its side, you're throwing all the air into their wheel well, and that slows them down. So it doesn't make you faster, it just slows them down, thus allowing you to get by them and all that little push and pull. So when you're seeing guys side by side, you're going to see them intentionally get really, really close. I'd say the best side drafter is Denny Hamlin by far, probably the best active super speedway racer at the moment. So that's going to be something to watch for this Sunday in that realm.
He's the favorite in Vegas this weekend.
Is he really?
Yep.
I mean, I think he might be he's got like 3 500 wins.
Believe so. Yeah. I mean, I can account for at least 2, but I believe 3 is the right number.
He's also got the most active wins at Daytona. So big shocker there. Denny Hamlin's going to be a guy to watch, that 11 car, and it's looking sharp. We didn't do Denny's 50-year anniversary.
That paint scheme is fire.
But we didn't get to do that last week. But
I try so hard to make sure that I don't just inject the favoritism here. I'm trying to remain objective throughout the different things, but at the same time, that is a fire ass paint scheme, and I'm really excited, and I really hope to see my boy get another dub here.
Wait, we're supposed to limit our favoritism?
To make sure I'm staying even keel for the pod.
We're limiting favoritism here? I didn't know. I'm just throwing a Jimmy Johnson win for no reason.
Shit, I didn't give you that memo, did I?
No, is there enough 14s in my camera shot? I don't know.
Oh, man.
So I think now that we've gotten through, kind of gone over what makes Daytona special, and started talking about the side drafting, started talking about pack racing, and some of the real significant things to watch out for at a track, not only just like Daytona, but also tracks like Talladega and some of your other super speedways that really characterize what that term means. I think one of the things we'd like to do is kick over to a segment we like to call History Lane, and what we did this week, and what we'll do here in the future as well, is we've gone back and watched a historic race to try and bring out some of the examples of some of the things that we're talking about, and also just kind of have a good time in bringing out some of the real nuance and intricacies of what made NASCAR special in different eras and different times frames, and some of the things that you really don't see now that are a lot of fun. So we went back to the 1981 Daytona 500, which, I mean, if you get a chance, it's on YouTube, go back and check this race out. If you really want to see quintessential classic NASCAR, come back and watch this race. I mean, big frames, large body cars, which at the time was its own subject of conversation because they actually shrunk the frame of the car before this, which was a subject of controversy before coming in. Mm-hmm. But let me go over some of the fast facts about the 81 Daytona 500. And then I'm going to kick it over to Finn for some of the more, important parts that he wanted to go over with this, because he watched this much more in depth and is going to be able to bring some more meat and potatoes to it. But the 1981 Daytona 500 was won by Richard Petty for his 7th Daytona 500 title. My God, the king, man. I mean, it's just, yeah. So it was Buick's first win since 1956, which was 25 years, which is, I mean, it's crazy. When you utter the phrase, Richard Petty won the Daytona 500 in a Buick, it's not something that you think of in modern NASCAR, which brings me to the manufacturers and makes and models that were involved in that race. So we had the Buick Regal, the Pontiac Grand Prix, the Oldsmobile Cutlass, the Ford Thunderbird, the Dodge Mirada, and the Chevy Monte Carlo, which it's very interesting to see this because if we got any older fans here that are listening to the show, this is going to ring a certain nostalgia bell, especially seeing that Monte Carlo out there, and seeing some of these, and seeing the Pontiac Grand Prix and the T-Bird and some of these other cars, because they were quintessential NASCAR vehicles that helped pave the way for the sport for a long time. And we've gotten to a point now where, what I believe Dodge ducked out in the early 2000s. I want to say 2003. Oldsmobile ducked out way before that. The T-Bird's no longer there. They've opted for the Mustang. The Pontiac has been out since, I believe. No, I got my numbers mixed up. I believe it was 2009 for Dodge to drop and 2003 for Pontiac to.
Yeah, because I was going to say
Oldsmobile and Pontiac don't even exist anymore.
Because I was going
even in the consumer market.
Yeah, because Ray Evernham was racing Dodge with Casey Kane and Jeremy Mayfield for a while. So Pontiac was out because Tony Stewart won. Gibbs used to be Pontiac, right? And then they went Chevy, and of course another Toyota. There was one Chevy in that whole field, by the way.
Yeah,
1901. There's a Chevy Monte Carlo. I think it was the debut of the Monte Carlo in NASCAR, and there was one Chevy in the whole field. So everybody else, the Buick, the Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Ford T-Bird, complete throwback.
So, and that was classic. So something kind of local to this area, and one of the reasons why it always rings to me is in our general area, there's a theme park called Kings Dominion. And there used to be a ride there called Days of Thunder, which it used to be sponsored by Paramount. So they modeled it after the movie, and it was a motion theater ride. And they used to have a car that was right outside of the. It was at that time, I believe, it was Kyle Petty's Mellow Yellow car. For like as far as real drivers are concerned, right. And it was supposed to model after for the movie, like so they were taking an actual movie prop and sticking it out there. But if I remember correctly, that was a Monte Carlo that was outside of the ride at that time. If I'm wrong on this, the whole internet's going to roast me for this one, but
I think,
or at least Virginia internet is going to roast me on that one because people remember that. People still call for that ride to come back. Anyway, for the sake of time, let me get back to the actual important numbers here. The pole speed for this race in 1981 was 194.6 miles per hour. The average speed during the race was 169.651 miles per hour. The purse, which it's interesting to see this listed because right now you don't get a lot of purse information. You cannot find the purse information for the 2022 Daytona 500 to find out the actual race ratings. It wasn't disclosed. And in modern racing, you don't get as much of that information because I think the figures are a little more convoluted. So the winner of that race won $90,575. Second place, $84,050. Third place, $53,115, and an estimated purse from me, I believe, was around $670,000. My numbers may be a little off because I literally punched them all into the calculator myself to get there, and typos happen. I'm human. I'm sorry. There were, and this will call back to our last episode, 4 cautions in this race. Unlike,
well, they also barely wore helmets.
Clash. Yes, so we're not in the teens. Attendance was listed for this race at 130,000 people, and there were 48 lead changes in this race. So now that I've gone over some of the general specifics and some of the fun facts with numbers on this one, I want to kick it over to Finn to kind of dive in and give us some clips, and let's take a trip down history lane.
Let me take you back here, okay? Back to 1981. You guys will remember freshman year of high school. And so we're not that old, Finn. So, all right. So first thing I want to point out is the big note I got is the storylines in 1881 are absolutely hilarious. The entire thing. Jeff talked about an interview that happened during the race. There aren't quite the personalities that we have in the sport now. Guys that aren't quite as TV and media reception well. They don't quite know how to be on camera. They're just country boys working on cars. So it's a very fun time. In the media, it's very raw, but again, it's pure. You get the sport of NASCAR. First thing I want to point out is the big thing was the pole sitter, Bobby Allison, and he was driving a Pontiac, I believe. And this car was the talk of the town. He dominated qualifying. He dominated his duel. The car was actually going to be banned after the race. And it's because of this. If you can look here, and he's going to be talking about it, but I'm going to keep him muted. So if you could look at the rear view, so look at him right next to Darrell Waltrip, Mr. Boogity 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 himself on the Mountain Dew number 11. You can see that rear windshield is actually very vertical, right? And whereas here on the car closest to us, which is Bobby Allison's car, not Ned Jarrett's, but Bobby Allison, it's kind of very angled off, kind of rolls back, and that gave him so much speed. Something that simple at 200 miles an hour and you think, is the wind even hitting that? You know what I'm saying? The whole car is displacing air. But that was the big talk of the town, was this car here getting that much speed, and he very much did. He led the most laps, and even though Richard Petty won this race and he didn't, he actually left this race with the points lead. So, and then the next thing I want to point out, which I think is absolutely hilarious, look at this chonker. So this is Terry Labonte driving the 44. I don't believe he was at Hendrick at the time. Terry Labonte in the 44 driving. That is a huge CBS camera. That is the in-car camera in 1981. Look at that chonker.
Also, CBS doing NASCAR.
Oh, yeah, they don't do NASCAR, do they?
That's what I'm saying. Like right now, you've got Fox and then going to NBC. I mean, I'm not sure when the last time CBS did NASCAR races.
Yeah,
that is a massive camera. Dude.
I mean, in an era where they're trying to find every NASCAR rulebook was still being written, pretty much. I mean, you want more. You kind of want the car to be lighter, don't you? As light as possible. Mm-hmm. I've heard a lot of things of like, and if you listen to the Dale Jr. download, he does a lot of interviews with old school drivers and crew chiefs and all their little tips and tricks. And I've heard one guy, he had a lead-filled helmet, and he put his helmet in the seat full of lead, extremely heavy, when it would go through inspection, and it would pass weight, and then he'd take it out and swap it for his normal helmet, and then the car was lighter. Nice. Little things that were hidden that would melt off during the race. So like they would pass specs, and then the race would occur, and then it would melt off, and then it would allow a little bit more speed or a little aerodynamics. There was a clip Dale Jr. put on Twitter when there's the in-car camera and it's looking down at the track at his hood, and you see a Budweiser sticker on the car, because the cars are now they're wrapped. They used to be painted and decals put on individually, but now they're wrapped, so they're completely flat.
NASCAR big criticisms about stickers. They're not big on tape and stickers nowadays.
Right. So there was a Bud sticker that, I mean, think about a normal size of a sticker, right? Well, they had stacked about 100 of them on top of each other, and that would just throw the air up. The tiniest little things. I can't imagine having this chonker of a home theater camera right beside you.
Well, I mean,
think
about having wireless video in 1981. Like, that's intense. This was not cheap technology back then.
I want to also, with that being, Corey's absolutely right on that. And the other thing to point out, one of my favorites when I was coming back and watching this race, speaking of these cameras in the cars, is them attempting to get RPMs and speedometer readings with these cars. There is no like, oh, it's like right up here we have sensors, or we have like anything like now where you have your throttle brake ratios and all this kind of information that you get on the broadcast. During this race, multiple times, there are literal points where they say, let's cut to the in-car camera, and they'll start talking about the RPMs while they're shifting. And it's just them trying to zoom this robotic camera in on the RPMs. It's blurry as hell. It's fuzzy. It's old analog video. You can't see a damn thing. But my God, is it just adventurous to try.
It's perfect. A quick shout out here. So Travis Pastrana, big stuntman, maybe the most well known stuntman of our era, right? Probably that guy, Nitro Circus. Everybody knows Nitro Circus. For sure. Trying his hand at NASCAR. Also in this race in 1981 was Stan Barrett, a big stuntman. Also, fun fact, the first person ever to break the sound barrier on land racing a rocket-fueled vehicle. I don't know if I can call it a car. I don't know what it was, but he raced in this race.
Flats.
And he was running 10th on the final corner of the final lap, and he put it in the wall. So similar to Travis Pastrana, throwing stock cars into the wall. That's not a dig. We're making enemies of Ryan Blaney and Travis Pastrana as we go.
And also shout out to big friend of the pod, Dale Jr.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So some important things to note about this race and the style of racing, right? 1981 is pre-restrictor plate racing. So what I'm going to do is, while we're just kind of chatting about this, I want to throw this up. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a little bit of the racing that occurred, because again, this is all pre-restrictor plate racing. And there's this move that was kind of invented by Junior Johnson. Obviously, he didn't invent drafting, but this thing called the slingshot. So what you do is, you get into the wake of the guy behind you, suck up right to his rear, and then you'll jump out just like right here on Bobby Allison, and then he's able, I believe that's Ricky Rudd, but able to go down and get in front of him and then slide. So that's the slingshot. He didn't need a drafting partner to do that. They don't really even need drafting partners in this situation. You just have to you just get in the wake and catch the guy in front of you, then you jump out and get that speed burst. So this is
Shake and bake, baby.
Yeah.
Shake and bake.
So, I mean, they're flying, but again, a little bit different. Fun fact about this race, actually, 5 cars on the lead lap. 5 cars. Richard Petty, Bobby Allison, Ricky Rudd, Buddy Baker, Dale Sr., and then in 6th place, the first car lap down was Bill Elliott.
Was this the number 3 Wrangler, the blue and yellow?
Number 2 blue and yellow Wrangler. He was racing the 2, Dale Sr. So and you see there's the slingshot right back, and then the 1 follows in with him. So that was the style of racing in these situations, pre-restrictor plate races, okay? Just a little bit different. Another thing I want to show you guys, and this is just, I think this is one of the most unhinged things I think I've ever seen in a stock car race. Jeff Bodine is going to wreck here. So first off, we get some of that fun in-car footage here of the Terry Labonte 44. So he has trouble. He has to take it back to the garage. And the 23 of Jeff Bodine is in the crowd. That is...
I mean, when you need medical attention, man, you drive to where it's at.
1981, you're like, I need a medic. Let me just... I mean, and they're going to show the highlight here in a second. If
that happened today, there'd be
major
investigations and tribunals, and people would be getting suspended, and there'd be all kinds of craziness.
So here he goes sliding in the background, Jeff Bodine, and he's trying to get a hold of it. You see him over there in the grass. There's no grip, and this thing just turns left. This 23 car.
Dude, he's gassing it up. I don't understand.
And look at all the things jumping out of the way.
Getting away.
What are we doing? What are we doing? And look, everybody's calm. Everybody's just
It's
chilling.
just normal. Somebody probably passed him a cigarette and said, "When are you getting back out there, man?"
He's like, well, I'm done driving for the day, so I'll take.
Hey,
And
he's
also,
like, "Yeah,
I love
ready to
these.
roll."
Yeah, dude, I love these photos. They just grabbed whatever. Like couldn't even grab like Facebook. They had to say, hey, message your mom, be like, hey, can you send a photo of us, of your son? We're just gonna throw it up there. It doesn't matter. And then ensuing this, actually, I want to show you guys. Look at that on pit road. There's no pit road speed limits. Look at and there's no safety gear, so they're not wearing helmets on pit road. Look how fast they are down pit road.
That is insane.
Do you know by chance when the speed limit for pit road got implemented?
Ooh, I do not know. Are you trying to fun fact me?
No, I'm not.
I know that there was.
genuinely
I know
wondering.
somebody died, or got very close to dying. They got hit on pit road. It was a crew member, and then I believe, I believe that ended up being what led to it on pit road. But I mean, look at them.
No
so they,
flame retardant suits.
no flame retardant. It's just a polo. Does that guy have a cigarette in his mouth? He's got something in
It
his
wouldn't
mouth.
shock me. I mean, dog, there's
Oh, it's
it's
just like
guys
tape.
that roll around in polos and pants.
These guys
It's your
seriously
shot
look
here,
like they
dude.
work at Jiffy.
Now look at this.
it's
Look
your
at that.
shot,
Look at
dude.
that car. Look how fast
how
that
it's
car.
Smoking the tires.
Dude,
What in the world, dude?
absolute insanity.
And
Absolute.
for our audio folks, we will make sure we get some links and stuff like that, so you can and some timestamps for you, so you can go back and check these out. Because I mean, this is an absolute trip. I immediately went to when they were showing some of the actual racing, like just outside of the comical stuff, was how popular that outside groove is
Right.
for these cars when they're coming around, and it's not just as they're coming off of a turn. When you see like some of these groups together, like that outside lane looked a lot more popular, especially coming out through the turn and staying in it as you're coming into the straightaways in a way that you don't always see nowadays.
Right. I'm not gonna lie. I'm so excited for this podcast to talk about the upcoming races, the news, but I'm thoroughly like excited for this section every week.
It's gold.
I can't wait for Corey to go back and watch some of those 2005 races when he's
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
be like, wait, the leaders on restarts didn't start in the front. It's like, no, sir, brother. There are lap cars out there, and you had to pass them. It's all the leaders fighting for lap cars. Or just all the nuances that maybe we forgot about NASCAR over the years via rule changes. And it's super exciting to kind of put yourself in 1981 and hear the stories. They're talking about the new latest and greatest race cars, and it's almost laughable now after we've come a long way. But also, you kind of get to learn more about the legends of the sport. Like you mentioned before, Richard Petty did win this race, and there's some cool facts about that. So Bobby Allison dominated the race in that 28 car, had the fastest car all day, but we've talked about pre-stage racing. One of the big things was strategies, race-long strategies, and what ended up happening is he was going to come into the pit and he ran out of fuel going on that lap. So on his pit lap, he ran out of fuel, and that led for him having a really, really slow lap. So a lot of time was made up. On top of that, Richard Petty's crew chief, Dale Inman, made a decision, and Dale Inman actually ended up, it was his last race with Petty. He ended up and going over to Dale Earnhardt Sr. But Dale Inman made a call to pit with no tires and fuel only. And super speedway cars are probably the only race that you can do that and get away with it with speed. Is the tires are the least important on super speedway races. But he ended up coming out of pits with like an 8-second lead, and Bobby's just running him down, but he couldn't catch him in time. 3 seconds ended up being the winning distance, and like I mentioned, only 5 cars on the lead lap, probably because of the various fuel strategies. But that's how it was back then on super speedway races. There were some guys that lapped the whole field, whereas now the only way that happens in today's super speedway races is if like there's a weird caution under green flag pitting, or a massive amount of wrecks, right? Usually you're not going to see like the field actually lap somebody. So thanks for going back in time with me to 1981. Next week, I'm excited because I want to send Corey to Auto Club in the prime of NASCAR's 1.5 mile racing, 900 horsepower. Don't know what race we're going to make him watch yet, but I tell you what, you're going to enjoy it. Auto Club was a fucking treat.
The next thing that we want to talk about now, I'm going to hand this one to Corey because we want to talk about Fantasy Live. Now, the big thing with this is we're going to be doing fantasy amongst ourselves, with the pod over the course of the year. As of this record, we weren't able to have our teams, but we will before Daytona. So, we will make sure to post our picks and our teams on Twitter. So be sure to follow and check us out there. And I'm going to hand this to Corey to give some background and some information on how NASCAR Fantasy works and what you got to do. So go ahead.
So NASCAR Fantasy is called NASCAR Fantasy Live. You access it on NASCAR.com. And effectively, it's not a matchup-based thing like some other fantasy sports are. So basically, each week you're going to pick 5 drivers you think you have a chance of scoring based on their finishing position that week. You pick a spare driver or a garage driver just in case one of your chosen drivers wrecks out. You can swap that garage driver in real time so you don't lose out on points. You can use each driver a maximum of 10 times during the regular season and 5 during the playoffs. Now, for those of you new fans out there, the NASCAR season is extremely long. Like, it's starting this year on February 19th. And I think it ends like between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Like, it ends in the holidays. It's like 14 and a half months long, it feels like. So to only get to use a driver 10 times, I mean, there's 30 races this year, 40 races or something like that. Right. And then 5 during the playoffs. The drivers earn points on finishing position and stage points. Stage points, basically end of a stage, wherever your driver is at that time, they get a certain amount of points based on that. And you get a bonus of 10 points per correct head-to-head matchup selection for a total of 4. So super fun. I'm an avid fantasy sports guy. Jeff and I have played fantasy football leagues together for 10 years. We play fantasy baseball. We all kind of love sports gambling and fantasy sports in our own way. But I'm super, super excited about this fantasy thing. You guys out there can play right along with us. You don't have to join a league. You don't have to commit any money to it. It's just for fun to test how your NASCAR prediction skills are coming along. So we'll all be making our picks a little bit closer to the race. And like Jeff said, we're going to drop those on Twitter at IntRecPod right before the race. I mean, or probably sometime Sunday morning, I would think.
Yeah, right before the race, and then make sure you're sharing your teams with us if that's something you would do. We're going to have a section on the podcast every week called Victory Lane, which out of us three, whoever's fantasy team did the best that week, they get a little minute or so to brag about their team. I'll tell you what, though, if I have Ryan Blaney on my team and I win, there will be no bragging. I will pass on that section. It's
you have to pick him for him to be on your
the
team.
The price of doing business. Hey, listen, I don't hate Ryan Blaney that much, so I'm not going to pick him on some of these tracks. Maybe he can be my garage driver, in case the real contenders wreck out. But no, make sure you share your team with us on Twitter, like Corey said. And if your team did well, we happily shout that team out on the podcast here live. But yeah, Twitter is the place to go for those things. And just to clarify the bonus points thing, there's going to be 4 head-to-head matchups that NASCAR Fantasy Live is going to put out. Maybe they say William Byron and Chase Elliott. And then, 3 more matchups, and you have to pick. And each one of those matchups that you pick, whatever driver got the most points, you get 10 per. And then that's up to 40 points extra for your fantasy team that week. So Fantasy Live, the link for that is in the description. It opens up, tomorrow, the 14th? So make your selections for
Valentine's Day, yeah.
For Daytona in that realm.
So now that we've finished through History Lane, and we've talked about fantasy, and we've given you a little more background on the modern iterations of the Daytona 500, I think it's time we get to the meatier part of the podcast that I think a lot more people might actually be waiting for and kind of sitting here on bated breath. Let's get to our race and season predictions. I want to get us a favorite for the Daytona 500. I would like to get us a playoff dark horse or a sleeper, somebody who didn't make the playoffs last year, somebody who ended up maybe getting bounced early, who may take a bigger step this year. Who do you think is going to be the best overall team this year? Who do you think is going to take a step back, be a team or a driver? Who is your championship favorite for this year, and who is your championship sleeper? I think we'll go with Finn first.
The Daytona 500. Man, as much as I want to put a Hendrick guy on the list for sleeper for the Daytona 500, I'm going to go with the guy who is kind of gaining a reputation for being one of the top super speedway racers. He's a protege of Denny Hamlin, and I think this year, with how well he finished playoffs last year, I'm excited to see what kind of steps Bubba Wallace can take this year. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I think Bubba Wallace is my favorite for the 500 this year, and the guy I think is going to win.
Okay, Corey?
This one's kind of tough for me. I have a couple of them. Favorites, recency effect, I got Martin Truex, man. He was so fast at the Coliseum, and I get that the track is very different and it's a different situation, but I don't know why. He had a rough year last year, and I just feel like you kind of just can't count him out right now. His car looks fast. I mean, what are we going to say? I also got Chase Elliott in there for the exact opposite reason. He looked terrible at the Coliseum and that entire week, and I think he's probably going to come out pissed off and run some guys down. And my last but not least of my favorites, I think might win this one, is Joey Logano. Logano is just fast, man. Like he won the championship last year. He's not the greatest super speedway driver in the world. I don't think a lot of people in Vegas are really picking him to contend, but I don't know. I just got a feeling. I got a Logano feeling this weekend.
I will say this. Elliott makes sense for you because I remember we were sitting there in the Discord watching the Talladega race, and when Elliott made the pass for, I believe, the win, he threw it in there. I remember you going, that's the greatest pass I've seen all year. Like that was the move of the year.
No question.
So yeah, Elliott certainly has got the ability to do it. Maybe not the best experience or best resume, but he's got the it factor at any single track you got. So I like that pick.
I'll go. Let me get my dark horse in here. Ryan Preece. I was going to go Jimmy Johnson. I thought better of it. My dark horse contender is Ryan Preece. We had a rookie win it last year. I think the Fords are going to be good this weekend. I got Ryan Preece, dark horse. Jeff, what you got?
So for Daytona 500, I got one name for you. As far as who's going to win this race, who's going to get their dub. Oh, listen to you guys, because I know who you think I'm about to say.
Okay.
For the sake of chaos, for the sake of fun, and just generally truly believing he does have a shot, Ryan Blaney.
Fucking do it.
I'm not even joking. I think Ryan Blaney
My guy.
makes the Daytona 500.
That would be huge for them, just because getting the win off their chest after, again, we talked about Truex Jr., but Blaney, outside of the All-Star race, didn't get a win last year.
Well, exactly. I'm kind of surprised that no one else
he's won.
tossed this one out
He's
there,
won
like
Daytona.
with all the history and everything else. I mean, we're at a point now where if Blaney ever listens to this podcast, he can be like, "What the hell did I do to these guys?" But
These guys talk about me so much.
with all of those factors in play, with the season last year, and just the way that chaos reigns at places like Daytona, particularly down towards those last 15, 20 laps, things get crazy. People start realizing time's running out. Your wrecks happen. Possible overtime comes into play. All kinds of factors come into play that can lead to guys that you wouldn't ordinarily expect to shine in this particular instance. I think the stage could be set for Ryan Blaney to take a 500 dub this year.
I would be so pumped. So pumped.
So
I don't know.
Hey,
next
Finn,
thing that
if you're going to get the camera out of Denny's at the front, buddy, you better have your camera out of Blaney's at the front. It's going to be a show.
Oh, man. No. I mean, listen, I don't wish ill will on anybody. So, I mean, he's good. He's a good driver. I hope he wins. He can do it. But it would be funny to hear you guys yell, "Hey, Crow, Finn!" Like it's 1/500. It's 1/500. Trevor Bayne is a 500 win. So.
Which, side note on that one, like this was also a heavy conversation topic between us just among friends last year, was when we were seeing what was going to happen with JGR and 2311 and seeing some of the newer guys coming up, and we were talking about Ty Gibbs and we were talking about Gragson and we were talking about some of the new drivers and who's going to come up next year. I personally thought that Bayne was going to get a shot in a Cup car next year, just because I felt like he was due. I felt like he raced well enough, with Xfinity last year. I felt like he was looking for his redemption arc to get back up in a Cup car and his experience. I generally thought that Gibbs was going to go with that experience factor. And this was also during the time that Truex was possibly, pondering retirement. So I thought we might have seen Bayne and Gibbs come up at that time, but that's a side note conversation. So the next thing is, who is your playoff dark horse this year? Maybe somebody that didn't get in, somebody that, had a rough year or was at the bottom of the, kind of at the bottom of the barrel of the playoffs last year, got bounced in the first round. Who do you got, Finn?
You just mentioned him, and I really do think that they've got the equipment, the experience to sneak Ty Gibbs a win this year. So I don't necessarily think that he's going to be a championship dark horse, but in terms of guys that can come in and steal a win, I think that Ty Gibbs is going to have probably the top equipment, if not the top, then at least some of the top equipment at JGR. He's a very talented driver. He did look pretty solid in the few starts that he got in Kurt Busch's 45. So I'm going to go with Ty Gibbs as my playoff dark horse here. Obviously, the easy low-hanging fruit is Martin Truex Jr. and those guys, but the true guy that maybe people aren't expecting to have the playoffs year one, let's go Ty Gibbs.
And Corey?
Well, I'm pulling it up here now. Did Bubba make the playoffs last year?
He did not make the playoffs last year.
I'm going Bubba Wallace, man. I didn't think he made the playoffs, and I think to speak to a lot of what you said, Finn, regarding the 500. I mean, the guy's just due. Like, he's due,
dude. He looked great at the end of last season. Fantastic.
But I don't even know if I'd consider him a dark horse. Like, that's how kind of pseudo confident I am that he's going to find his way in this year. I really do think it's going to be Bubba's year. I mean, we can see some big things.
Bubba has moved, in my opinion. Now it doesn't invalidate the pick. I totally understand where that's coming from. I think we've moved beyond the point of Bubba Wallace really being a sleeper. I think after that win at Kansas last year, that was another thing where,
Yeah.
He was finally getting to a point where he was silencing doubters. He was getting to a point where there was no long, before anybody could say, oh, well, he won a rain delay at Dega and, he did this or he did that, and people could, anybody that was looking for any possible reason to doubt, him as a talented driver in any way that they could, they basically lost. Those things started to fall apart last year. And it wasn't the win at Kansas was huge. But on top of that, there were so many races he was just in last year. There were so many moments last year where you had a feeling at just about any point he could break to the front and take the win. So I think we're finally seeing the emergence of Bubba Wallace past, young star, hot shot, moving past the point of, when is he going to get there? He's on his way. He's going to be there. I think we're moving past Bubba Wallace as a sleeper.
And I think along with being a pro Haley Deegan pod, I think we're a pro Bubba pod, honestly. Like, I think all of us would love nothing more than to see that guy succeed. And I think this could be the year, man.
Yeah,
Looks like a genuine. Everything, like watching the documentary and post-race interviews, Twitter, like everything else, just generally seems like the nicest guy. You know what I mean? There's so many drivers that you feel like you go have a beer with. Bubba's definitely one of those dudes. I feel
sitting in
like
his car a bit at the Coliseum, that was weird.
Yeah,
that was a little weird. Other than that, super cool.
Well, I think I'm a big fan of the sport being having a huge influx of talented drivers. Very happy to see what's going on with Trackhouse and Chastain and Suarez. Ryan Preece coming up and seeing, if Stuart Haas can get back to being extremely competitive and having 2 to 3 cars that can win every week, that's only going to make the sport more interesting because these guys are so talented at so many disciplines. Tack that on with NASCAR making improved efforts to make road courses and short track racing better. That's where a guy like Bubba's one of Bubba's best tracks is Martinsville. And these short track races, and if they continue to improve the package and allow those cars to really be able to pass, we're just going to, Bubba was leading at the Coliseum for a while and was real quick at the Coliseum. Toyota looks really good earlier this year. They looked really good in the back half of last year. Excited. Another playoff dark horse guy, though, again, we mentioned him, Martin Truex Jr. I don't think he goes 2 years without a win. He's a champion. He's a veteran. It's one of the most dominant. He has got some of the most dominant wins we have seen. It used to be like, oh, great, Martin Truex Jr. won another race where he led 300 laps, So really excited.
A sleepier pick, give me Eric Almirola.
Ooh, Eric Almirola is always a guy who steals a race. It's like we go to New Hampshire and it's like, all right, Eric Almirola is going to win, But I agree. Yeah, I think any Stewart Haas,
sleepier than Bubba. I think
any Stewart Haas guy outside of Chase Briscoe is going to be considered. Harvick maybe. I would say Harvick, with 2 wins last year, but he didn't really look all that great across the board. So, but I hope for a revival.
I definitely thought you were going for any Stewart Haas guy has a chance to make the playoffs except for Chase Briscoe. That's where I thought you were going.
No. We are a pro Chase Briscoe podcast as well. We're a pretty positive podcast. We're just an anti Ryan Blaney podcast. That's all we are.
No, we're not. You are. You're an anti Ryan Blaney podcast.
You already said. My playoff sleeper was Truex anyway, so you pretty much said everything that needed to be said on that one, Finn. It was a shocker to me to see him have the year that he had last year. The guy is a hell of a driver. He's got the pedigree. He's just, when he wins. And when he's somebody that you rarely ever expect Truex to be pulling up the rear of a race.
Right.
You expect him to be in it just about every time. He races hard. He runs fast. He's a great driver. So the next we have is our best overall team on the year. Finn, what about you?
This is where we're actually going to see my bias come out, and I'm going to put Hendrick. All 4 cars made the playoffs. I'd say if anybody's putting together a top 5 list, every single list by every single person doing it is going to include Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson. They're by far 2 of the most dominant guys on the track. Bowman didn't really get a chance to to kind of get in the playoffs with everything that happened after, what was it, Texas or Kansas? Well, I think it was Texas, the Texas race with the concussion. And then Willie B is always, always a quick guy. I think across the board, we're going to see all 4 Hendrick cars in the playoffs again. And I would argue they're probably all going to make the round of 8, barring, somebody just really shouldn't have been. And that's the expectation with Hendrick Motorsports. Those cars, they got a lot of money, they got a lot of sponsorship money, they've got a lot of testing and data, and of course they're headed off by Chad Knaus. So I'm gonna say I think Hendrick ends up being the best overall team this year with all of those guys healthy, and another year with the next gen.
Okay, what about you, Corey?
As much as I hate it, Finn's got this nailed. It's Hendrick, man. I mean, I'll take it in a little bit of a different direction and say that I could see JGR being the most dominant team if it wasn't for some of the shuffling, losing Kyle Busch,
right.
Some things moving around. You got Ty Gibbs coming up onto the team. Understands young guys, super fast but inexperienced.
Right.
These Hendrick guys have just been there, done that, man. Right. They're so fast. It's annoying. I don't like them. I mean, I don't like Hendrick Motorsports in here. It's undeniable the talent and skill and just will to win that the Hendrick guys bring to the track. And it as much as I would love to say, Haas or JGR, it's just you can't compete. You can't compete with Hendrick. They're just the top shit.
Okay. I mean, we're actually at a consensus. We have hit an actual podcast consensus at this point, because I was going to say Hendrick for myself too, for a lot of the same reasons. Not? So to make this fun, to add a little bit into the mix, here's my question. Who is the first Hendrick driver to get a win this year?
Chase Elliott. It's going to happen on Sunday.
Okay.
Barring one of them winning the 500, I would say your bet. If you had to put your money somewhere, if you really had to put your money somewhere, Kyle Larson is the defending winner of Auto Club in Fontana, and we saw what he can do at one of those true driver mile and a halves. And I think that he would be the guy. But then you got Vegas, which is one of Bowman's best tracks. I'm going to go Larson just because he's the most skilled out of the group. That's the easy answer. But if not Larson, I'd go Bowman.
Okay. Well,
what
for me,
what about you, Jeff?
I think William Byron
takes
the first win, is the first Hendrick driver to get the win and seal the playoffs.
Yeah, he's quick.
I just feel like there was a point there when we were running through 2020 and 2021 that Byron just, he surprised me in a lot of ways. I mean, because I was very surprised last year, generally between Bowman and Byron, in feeling as though those guys didn't perform last year up to what I thought they could based on what I was seeing a few years ago. I felt like it was more of a down year for those guys last year compared to what I saw. I mean, there were multiple times last year where I'm going, how the hell is Alex Bowman falling this far back?
But you saw flashes, though. But you saw flashes from both. Where it's like, man, why is that 24 so fast? Why is that 48 so fast? You see flashes where that, just Hendrick, I'm going to drive
gear and the money's behind them.
Happens.
Right.
Yeah. It happens.
Right. And not to make this a Hendrick long thing, we got the other things to go, but, one of the biggest moves in the Hendrick camp this year is that Michael McDowell's crew chief from Front Row Motorsports, a very respected young creative guy. He's actually moving over to be the crew chief for the 48 this year. In their first race, they looked really good in the Clash. I think they ended up sealing top 5, 6, and I think it was just a bad call picking the outside lane. But really excited for those guys in the 48 camp and to get back. And yeah, I don't hate Willie B. Willie B is real quick at all these tracks. So, yeah. You want to do the take back?
Okay. So with that being the case, I think our next point is going to be what team is going to take a step back this year, or driver. But I mean, I feel like team may be a more all-encompassing look. What do you think, then?
So I'm not saying this out of disrespect in that I think that they're not going to be good. I'm going to say this in that I can't believe they did so well last year, and I don't even know how you could possibly mimic that. And if they do, holy shit, get a third charter and go all in. Because Trackhouse last year, out of nowhere, Corey, Raj Chastain is not some young hot prospect. Raj Chastain was wasting away in Xfinity, struggling to get wins, dude. Like, he was not, he came over in the 42 when they used to be Chip Ganassi and raced pretty well. Then he goes with Daniel Suarez to Trackhouse, and they are, I think they are, every road course race, both of the Trackhouse guys need to be in your fantasy live. Daniel Suarez looked fantastic at Coda. He won Sonoma. Chastain won Coda, and they've looked good. They were good at short tracks, even aside from the Martinsville thing. I don't with it being only a 2-car team, I don't know how they could mimic last year. Final 4 for 1. Suarez, there were portions. I think it was I think he had a mechanical issue go down at the Roval that kept him out from advancing, but he looked great. I don't know how they can mimic last year with all of the shifting, but I hope they do, because Trackhouse is, I think that's the bread and butter of NASCAR. Bring in these
Good for
guys.
the sport.
Yeah, it's great for the sport. So I hope they do. I'm not trying to speak ill, but I don't see how they can continue to do how well they did, man. They were fantastic last year.
They set the bar pretty high.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
All right. Well, Corey, what about you? What do you think?
I hate to do it to you, Jeff. JGR.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
it's like, I think Joe Gibbs Racing, when you lose a guy who is an ambassador for the sport, love him or hate him, even I knew who Kyle Busch was before I even started really paying any attention, right? And I don't know what kind of impact that's necessarily going to have, but you can't lose a personality like that from your team. You can't lose a talent like that from your team. Replace it with a young guy. Granted, again, Ty Gibbs, super fast. His grandfather owns a team. All of that. I think when you lose Kyle Busch, all the rest of the guys on the team are great, but you're just losing some of your juice.
Right.
And for that reason only, I'm going to say JGR.
Yeah, I don't hate that.
Okay.
I don't hate that. If Martin steps up and gets a win and gets in the playoffs, then this can very well be a team that overperforms. But going based off of what you saw last year, add in the fact that Ty Gibbs is a rookie, add in the fact that Chris Bell really needed some clutch wins that aren't always going to happen in the sport to really even get to in the only car to get to the Final Four for Joe Gibbs Racing. I could see that. And Denny's getting up there in age now. So,
Right.
he might be over the hill and not ready to get her done.
I'll ignore that, and we'll go to the next part. And to be honest with you, I actually agree. That was my step back, but it's for different reasons. So yes, Kyle Busch going, you kind of lose this like tremendous stable of drivers that you've had for the last few years, right? Because for the longest time now, for the last few years at least, you had MTJ, Denny Hamlin, and Kyle Busch, who allowed, when Christopher Bell jumped onto the team, I mean, how much expectation is really there at that point, right? Because like Eric Jones, it obviously didn't work out. It wasn't really there. He wasn't coming out and he wasn't a barn burner when he came out for the team, and obviously it didn't work out with the team, so they dropped him and went with Bell. And I personally thought that move was for the better. I really like Chris Bell. I think he's going to really, really turn heads over these next few years and become a premier driver. I think he's already well on his way to do that. But in that same light, I think something that needs to be acknowledged in this discussion is when you're talking about the Hendricks and you're talking about the RCRs, when you're talking about the Trackhouses, you're talking about all these other teams that are out there, you have to remember there is a certain camaraderie that has to exist between JGR and 2311 being the only Toyota houses there. And this is the thing. I think JGR possibly takes a step back this year. I think we see 2311 take a step up. So, and what I think is happening here is we're going to see a significant shift there in the sense that Team Toyota is going to do very well this year. But I think as there has been over these last couple of years, you're going to see resources, you're going to see aspects that are going to kind of pump towards making that happen. I think we see less pit stop mishaps this year. I think we see more chemistry. I think we see more fluid. I think we see a much more cohesive team among Team Toyota as a whole. But I think JGR doesn't quite do as well as 2311 does this year.
Right.
So I mean, and it's nothing. I think Ty Gibbs is going to do fine. I think he has the potential to possibly sneak his way into the playoffs this year and everything else. But I don't think it's necessarily for the quite as obvious reason of losing Busch. I think that we are going to see Toyota as a whole do well, but I think we will see 2311 do a little better than JGR. Much to, I guess, my dismay, even though I personally believe Denny could get out there and drive really well and win a few races and do his thing. And it still could not necessarily mean that JGR performs above expectation.
Right.
So, if that makes sense. So I think the next we want to go for is our championship favorite. So who's going to win the whole effing show? Finn?
You want to do that and our dark horse together?
Yes. Give me your championship favorite and give me your championship dark horse and explain why.
Okay, I've got two Toyota drivers here. I don't know why. I just feel like it's Toyota's turn. We've had back-to-back Chevys, then we had a Ford. I think it's time Toyota gets it. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be the 11. I think he's going to maintain his title as one of the top drivers without a ring. But the driver that I do think is going to be a favorite for getting the ring is the guy that's... we had Kyle Larson for years. We watched Kyle Larson in equipment that was subpar, secondhand gear that we just knew wasn't it, and we watched him finish second and win races and show it off. First year on a brand new team, on a premier team, he wins a championship. This year, I think Tyler Reddick is the guy for that, and I think that's going to be my favorite. I think that Tyler Reddick has got some of the most skilled, most driver skill in NASCAR. He's a fantastic road course racer. I think he won Indy, right? He can race in all types of tracks. He should have won the dirt race, but wasn't for Chase sending it. He's a fantastic mile-and-a-half guy, and I think he's got enough skill and maturity now to be a leader on that team and to take that. So I know it's a little bit of a risky situation to go over to a new manufacturer, a new team, and maybe 2311 isn't the premierest team of NASCAR, but I think they've got great gear. I think he's going to be backed by some great support with JGR. I think it's I almost want to pen it in with some cash. I think Tyler Reddick has his true breakout year, and he can go get himself a ring. As for the dark horse, I'm going to go for the other young gun, Christopher Bell. If you go back to that Phoenix race, if Christopher Bell's team doesn't botch a pit stop, he's the champion. He's the champion. So in my mind, I think that those are two guys that I'm really excited for this year. Guys that I'm going to be watching. I mean, again, we talked about Bubba. I think all eyes are on 23XI and the young guys in Toyota because those guys can really make noise. But that's my favorite. Tyler Reddick, dark horse, Chris Bell.
I don't understand how we seem to be like because when you really consider with Finn being a Bowman guy, and as much as he likes to kind of he likes to nudge me in the ribs on that kind of stuff and little things like that. And we joke about, some of the little feuds that happen in there and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of interesting how we tend to be on very, very similar wavelengths. Cause I mean, Corey, I'll get to you in a second. This is a little out of order, but I think it goes with what's happening here is that my dark horse was Reddick. I thought that Reddick was my sleeper.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing. That doesn't mean that, it's nothing against like skill or anything like that. You're absolutely right. He is absolutely like on his way to being a premier driver in NASCAR Cup Series. But I personally had him as my sleeper. Our championship favorites do differ though, because to me, my championship favorite, which will surprise absolutely nobody, is this guy right here, Mr. Denny Hamlin. And maybe this is just me hoping. I've said I've tried to stay objective. I try not to put a lot of favoritism in there. But also when you root for a guy like Denny, sometimes it's hard because he's good. So with that being the case, my championship favorite is Denny Hamlin. My championship dark horse is Tyler Reddick. What do you got, Corey?
Well, I have no problem going last year because it provides me with a fantastic discussion of the last guy we're going to talk about today. But we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit here for the favorites. I have three. My first two, they go without saying. Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson.
Yeah.
Those two are easy.
Ryan Blaney, and
No.
Ryan Blaney.
No, I don't have Ryan Blaney anywhere on my sheet. However, So I'll take the two. I'll be the guy to say the two easy ones, Larson and Elliott. That required no thought on my part. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
My third one here, hate to do it to you, Jeff. I got Ross Chastain. That guy has proven that he will do anything. Yeah. That team is not playing around, man. They are not playing around. Maybe he was in the doldrums a couple years ago in his career. Not anymore.
He's a big dog.
That guy is a legit contender. Mm-hmm. He's got a fast car. He's on a team with a guy who clearly is a fantastic teammate in Daniel Suarez. Yep. Justin Marks knows what he's doing. He was rock solid all year last year. Didn't really have pit issues. I got my third favorite is Ross Chastain. Yeah, my dark horse. And here it comes, boys.
I didn't change because
Briscoe.
I didn't want to do it.
Chase Briscoe. And Jeff said it, right? We try to avoid favoritism here, or at least pretend to, but I can't. This guy has got this. He's got the sauce, man. He's got it. He's on a team. It's Kevin Harvick's retirement victory celebration year, right? I get that. Briscoe's the premier car on this team.
100%.
You got Priest, you got Harvick, you got Almirola, but Stewart-Haas, they know Briscoe's going to be out front. He made it to the round of 8 last year, thanks in large part to my guy Cole Custer. Shout out. But it's Briscoe, man. I mean, I would love nothing more. He's just a chill, laid-back guy from the Midwest, unassuming. But when you see that red Mahindra 14 coming up behind you, boy, you better look out. Just ask your boy Tyler Reddick.
Look at because it's coming. Objects in the mirror are closer than they feel. So my thing with Briscoe, and he's on my list, but I didn't want to take it from you. This is your guy. I gotta let you chat about him. Didn't want to get too far into it, but the way NASCAR currently is we have a championship race at Phoenix. A lot of guys are advocating that there should be a final 4 races that encompass all the different styles of tracks, and the winner of the final 4 guys make those 4 races, and then they have to compete, or make it 8 guys competing. That way, there's more people competing. But for now, it's one race, and it's Phoenix, and the fastest car at Phoenix, both races last year, was Chase Briscoe.
Ford's won both races there last year.
That's fair enough. I mean, I see it. I honestly, I think that Briscoe is just another one of those guys that I think is going to be a name within this sport for a very long time. Right. And at this point, and what determines that is what happens this year. Right? I mean, what happens throughout this year and what he does as being, aside from Harvick on his way, like Briscoe becomes the face of that team. So what does he do with it? That's where those are the questions, and they're laid out for him, to answer right there. So we'll kind of see how he steps up and how he answers it. And I have no problem believing that he can answer the call. Well, folks, I think that's going to do it for us this week. Remember to check us out on Spotify, YouTube, and iHeartRadio, and like and comment and subscribe. Please follow us on Twitter at INTWRECKPod. That's INTWRECKPOD. Make sure you send in your fantasy picks next week. Check out our live tweets on race day. We'll talk with you and go over all these different things as we go through the race. We'll make sure to respond and we'll chat with you. We're active enough. And I say everybody enjoy the race, and we'll see you next week.
Let's go. 14, baby.